Hello, I'm Ollie and this is Connolly, where I talk about crime, pulp, horror, that kind of thing. Today I've got details of an exciting new reading event, Occult Detective October. So I'm slightly late in putting up this announcement video. Most of my co-hosts have already put their videos up. I will put links to all of the co-hosts in the description for this video so you can check out their channels if you're not already subscribed to them. So Occult Detective October, as the name suggests, is a reading event taking place in October, dedicated to reading occult detective stories. So it's the brainchild of MJ from the channel Reading This Life, and I think it's going to be a really fun event. So occult detective is probably a term I hadn't even heard before I got onto BookTube and started watching other people's videos about horror books. But really it's something that I've read, many examples of over the years without realising it. So as the name suggests, an occult detective story is basically a mystery story, detective story, where there are kind of occult or supernatural elements to it. And quite often you end up with like a series of books where you've got the same detective, as is often the case with mystery novels, where you've got the same detective investigating, a bunch of different weird goings on. So if you think about, occult detectives in popular culture, the X-Files is a really good example of an occult detective kind of show. So obviously they strayed into sci-fi with some of the episodes, but there's definitely some X-Files episodes which are, much more around the supernatural. So it's a really fun genre to dive into, or subgenre to dive into. And I suspect that even if you don't realise it, you've got some occult detective books on your shelves. And if you haven't, the various co-hosts for the event are coming up with a huge list of recommendations. We've got some really, really knowledgeable people who are acting as co-hosts, including Dave Brzeski, who's the publisher of Occult Detective magazine, which is a magazine I've talked about on the channel before. And I'll put a link in the description to the video to the Occult Detective magazine website, where you can download a free issue of that magazine, which will give you a flavour of kind of occult detective stories. So it's a subgenre that's existed for a long, long time. There are examples of, occult detective stories going back to the kind of pulp magazines from the 30s and even earlier than that. So there's a wealth of stuff out there, including, more modern stuff. So one of the books I've got on my list to read is Full Moon by Jim Butcher. So the Dresden Files is a really popular kind of urban fantasy series. Definitely falls into the occult detective subgenre. So, as I say, there's loads of different examples, and it occurred to me when I was preparing for this video that two of my favourite series have done occult detective stories. So one of those is the 87th Precinct series, which is my favourite mystery series, or indeed my favourite book series of all time. So Ed McBean, the author of those, did an entry in the series called Ghosts, where one of the subplots involves the detectives investigating a haunted house. So they are, it's kind of a straight police procedural, but with a haunting element to it. And the Executioner series, so the McBean books, which I talk about a lot on the channel, which started out as, one man, McBean, fighting a war against the mafia, ended up going in all sorts of different directions, including an entry fairly late on, I think, in the series, when it was well into the hundreds, called Night Kill, where McBean investigates various kind of gangs of Satanists. Another author who I've talked about on the channel before, who's done his own occult detective series, is Guyan Smith. So a well-known pulpy British horror writer from the 70s and 80s, did a series of, I think there's 5 or 6 books in total in the series, called Sabbat, about an ex-SAS soldier who's turned into an occult detective and, goes up against devil worshippers and things like that. And James Herbert, the the horror writer, or again another British horror writer, also did a few occult detective style stories, particularly about a photographer called Dave. I think his name was David Ash, the hero. There's a few books in that series. So yeah, there's loads of different stuff out there, and as I say, as we get closer to the start of October, we will be publishing a list of loads of different options that you might want to check out. Another one I'm really keen to dive into is the Charlie Parker series by John Connolly, which I read a few of these years ago, but there are there's I think probably dozens now in the series. The first few, I think I read the first 2 or 3 back in, I guess, the late 90s probably, and really enjoyed them, and I've been meaning to go back to the series. So I think this month of reading occult detective fiction is going to give me an excuse to do that. So as always, or as is often the case with these reading events, we've got some weekly prompts. So there are 4 weeks to think about. So week 1 is classic occult detective fiction, so pre-1960 is the date we set for that. So, there are, for example, Sherlock Holmes stories which fall under the occult detective umbrella, both original ones by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, but also some of the more recent kind of pastiche ones by authors like James Lovegrove definitely fall into the occult detective subgenre. So the book I'm going to read for that first week is a book of short stories by an author I've read before, so William Hope Hodgson. So I read his book House on the Borderland years ago as a teenager and was absolutely blown away by it, and I've been meaning to read him again since then and have never got around to it. So he published a series of stories about a character called Carnacki the Ghost Finder. So I think there's 7 or 8 stories in the collection. It's available free on Kindle because it's in the public domain now, so I'm going to check that one out. I remember Hodgson being a really good writer. Second week is modern, so post 1960s. So I'm going to read, I'm probably going to read a couple of things for that. So I think I'm going to read the Jim Butcher book Full Moon, so the Harry Dresden books. I've also got the second one, so if I enjoy that first one, I might dive into the second one as well. And also possibly, as I've said, I think I'm going to start the Charlie Parker series by John Connolly from the beginning again. So I got an omnibus edition on Kindle. I don't know if it's still available, but it was quite cheap. That's got, I think, the first 5 books in it. So I'm going to dive into them again. So that's week 2. Week 3 is to read a book as an occult detective book with either a diverse main character or by a diverse author. So I've got, again, a couple for that. So those are Hammers on Bone by Cassandra Core and Agents of Dreamland by Caitlin R. Kiernan. So these are both in a collection of 4 novellas that Tor Books put out a while ago, which is available on Kindle, and it's quite cheap. I think it's about 6 or 7 quid, and you get these 4 novellas in it. I've read the first 2, so the Ballad of Black Tom by Victor Laval, which definitely counts as occult detective fiction and is excellent, and The Dream Quest of Vellet Bow by Kidge Johnson, I don't think would count as occult detective, but it is very good. So this collection is 4 modern diverse authors kind of revisiting the Cthulhu mythos that H.P. Lovecraft came up with. So it's kind of modern takes on Lovecraftian stories. And the first 2, as I said, were both excellent. So the second 2 both fall under the occult detective umbrella. So I'm going to give those 2 a try. And then the final week is an Anything Goes week. So I'm going to read this book, The Stone of Destiny by Andrew Neil MacLeod. So I read the first book in this series, The Fall of the House of Thomas Weir, a few months ago, and I've talked about it on the channel. So it's an occult detective series with Dr. Johnson and Boswell as the 2 heroes. The first book was really fun, a really wild, enjoyable pulp adventure. So very much looking forward to the second one. And if I have time, I will also probably try and fit another Charlie Parker book into that week as well. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to this month. It's the kind of stuff I love. I love mystery novels, I love detective novels, and I love horror fiction. So it feels like an event tailor-made for me, which is nice. As I say, I'll leave a link to all the other co-hosts in the description, and I'll leave the weekly prompts in there as well. But yeah, let me know in the comments if you think you're going to be taking part. There will be a section to discuss reads on MJ's Discord, which I'll leave a link to in the description for this as well. So yeah, I think it's going to be a really, really fun month, and I'm very much looking forward to it. So yeah, I will leave it there and say, as always, thanks very much for watching. Hope you're safe and well out there. Hope you're reading good stuff, and I'll speak to you again very soon. Cheerio.